Ruth chapter 1. This chapter tells the story of 3 women. Some men are mentioned as well, but they only have bit parts. In a film of this book, and it has been filmed, I doubt the actors playing the men in this chapter would even get credited. The women, on the other hand, are centre stage, and they all have lessons to teach. Firstly, Naomi. Naomi is the matriarch. She holds the family together, what there remains of it. Devastated by famine and hard work in a foreign country, one after another of the menfolk die. But she remains. Even Naomi is broken at the end. She doesn't give up easily. She fights. But she loses her husband and 2 sons, and she is too old to marry again. The book doesn't tell us how old that is. So, in her society, she has lost everything and is exceedingly vulnerable. She decides to go home to Bethlehem because there is more chance someone will have mercy on her there. But she cries out to God in despair. She is human. She is not a robot. And there is only so much pain and suffering a person can bear. She had experienced more than her fair share, so she cries out in her despair. And that is what we can learn from her. Maybe we are suffering. Maybe we are sick, even very sick. Maybe we are suffering terribly from isolation. Maybe we have lost people who are near and dear to us. Or maybe our livelihood has been threatened or has been lost. If we are suffering, we need to cry out to God in our need. He will not hold it against us, even if we do put the blame on him, as Naomi did. He will hear, and he will help us. He will not always take us out of our suffering, but he will help us, comfort us, and give us his strength. And he will help us to carry on. But first we need to acknowledge our need and pour out our complaint before him. Secondly, Orpah. Orpah often gets a bad press because of this story. She looks bad in the light of Ruth's example. But things would not have appeared like that at the time. She did not abandon her mother-in-law at the first opportunity, despite the fact that Naomi had nothing to give her. It would appear that she would have stayed with Naomi had Naomi not decided to return to Bethlehem. In Bethlehem, Naomi might find family to help her, but nobody would give Orpah from Moab, a traditional enemy of Israel, the time of day. And Orpah had a family in Moab too. Despite that, she clung on to Naomi until Naomi sent her away. She chose her family and her land at the last, instead of an uncertain future with Naomi. We might like to think we would have done differently. But would we really? Does our love for God and his people truly override all our other interests? Or does God just get what we can spare of our time and our love? Faced with a choice like Orpah's, what would we choose to do? Thirdly, Ruth. Ruth is held up as an example of a model convert. But is she really? Her conduct later in the story does raise questions, and in the context of the time when the story was set, her words may have meant something different from what we think they mean. Ruth does not say that she ceases to believe in the god of Moab, Chemosh. She does say she will not worship him, but worship Israel's God instead. But in her culture it was taken for granted that one worshipped the God favoured by the head of the household. In this case, Naomi. She knows nothing about Israel's God. She hasn't a clue whether he will help her, a Moabite, though she's pretty sure that Chemosh would not help an Israelite. Gods in those days were very nationalistic. But she loves Naomi so much, she commits herself to her people, and her God, without having any sure knowledge that there was going to be anything in it for her. In fact, Naomi gives her to understand that there probably won't be. But Ruth makes her great vow and goes with Naomi all the same. Would we do that? Give up everything to take a chance on God when everything seemed to suggest that the effort was futile? Would we journey into a foreign place, a foreign culture, where everybody despised us and the cards were stacked against us? Would we take on the status of an immigrant? That is what Ruth did, and it is very largely what Jesus did hundreds of years later. And it is what Jesus calls his followers to do. Will we follow